Let me invite some questions from the audience. There's a microphone here, coming down. Hand up down here, please.
You've spoken, about social reform and storytelling and everything. Just looking at who is the greatest writer, I think if I was writing an essay on that, I don't know, have you addressed that? I mean, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. The third lady, the Orwell lady there. Sorry. You mentioned about language. I'd be interested to hear whether you think that Dickens, takes language on or treats language in the same way as Orwell. And I mean, you went into Levi as well. And so do you think that Orwell really took language on? I mean, I'd like to hear the sort of two sides of that. Just what is a writer?
Well, I think that Orwell lays down the law about writing in a way that's quite paradoxical in his practice. He's not very keen on unitary, non-democratic authorities, and yet, in essays on how to write, he's very clear that this is the best way to write. I am a language authority who is against all many other sorts of authority. I think he's not full of other voices in the way that Dickens is. Dickens is fascinated by all sorts of strange ways of talking, from Sam Weller onwards. There's never a page of Dickens without an absorption in ways of speaking which are just English or Englishes. I think now he would be absolutely fascinated in the state that the English language has reached and where it's come from. He wouldn't. I can't see any sign. I may be wrong, but I can't see any sign in Dickens that he's really all that bothered about a notion of correctness. And in fact, the more correct the users of English grow in his novels, often the more ridiculous they are, and they're called things like Volumnia Deadlock. I think.
Yeah, go on, agree. I'll just say that I think I think writing is a very complicated and very various thing, and that's why I said I thought it was like Leviathan. I think that the kind of writing he does is not just novels. They're very odd things, but I think they're writing, and I think writing prose and writing essays is usually enormously undervalued in comparison to poetry and literature. So this is very dangerous territory sitting next to these people, but I think that argument and prose are as poetic to write and as difficult to write when well done actually as poetry and novels, and actually highly wrought, highly contrived, highly elegant, very important form. So I think good essays, which I think Dickens falls into the great essayist, are very important. I think that what Orwell does is, and of course he's full of sham and he acts and he's just as Dickens does, and he plays himself and he plays being Orwell. That's not the issue. He does have this. He doesn't tell you how you should write a novel. He does say that language is so important that when it is interfered with by social scientists, I'm a social scientist, or government statisticians, or governments, or people describing advertising, all of these ways in which language is polluted, we lose political traction. And that seems to me such an important message.
I hate the word pollution in this context. I really hate it. It's, I think it's just the language of purity and impurity, and I just don't think it's open to the possibilities of language.
Another question at the back here, and then one over there.
Listening to the defence of Orwell, it would appear that his greatness is predicated on his political element, which I think is really unfair, because in a time of rampant fascism and communism, this is a time when Dickens wasn't writing, so you can't test whether he would have been a political animal in the same way.
The one thing that I might say to that is that at the end of the Second World War in 1945, I've got this from David Kinniston's wonderful book about Britain, Austerity Britain, Dickens was the fourth most borrowed author from public libraries in Britain. That's 75 years after he died. So I think that they saw a relevance, even if Dickens wasn't around to be combating.
Artie, what would you say to the argument that Orwell couldn't fail, but people are...
It's a bit like having a discussion about, pork dishes and not being able to talk about pork. I mean, a writer, a thinker, a creative is a creation of their time. And it's not merely that Orwell was writing about fascism and totalitarianism. I can't find another writer. If what you're saying, sir, is true, there should be swathes of political novels from Orwell's time that speak to us and communicate with us in that same way. They grab into our minds and our souls, in such a memorable way. I've not found them. Have you?
Well, that's actually not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're comparing the two, that's the dichotomy. You're looking at your defence predominantly has been that he is a great political subversive. We're not talking about another 1940s or 1950s novelist.
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to make you run all the way back there again now, actually. I think we're... Thank you very much. I think we're done there. Sorry, this is just it's a fiendish plot to give you as much exercise as possible. There's a hand that's been up for a while over there, and then we'll come down here.
You talked about the shortfalls of Dickens. I wonder if when I read the essay that George Orwell wrote on him, I wonder if you think he maybe filled in the gaps that he thought that Dickens left. The way Dickens describes things. If you read something like Coming Up for Air, it's very simple. He describes these changes in a very simple way that maybe Dickens would, skirt around more and makes it more accessible to people.
Slightly in the defence of Dickens, when he does write as well as he does, it's quite difficult to moan when he overwrites, because it's great writing. Make the point for you there, Philip.
Well, but it is a very odd essay, Orwell on Dickens. In a way, he's saying, I don't really want to like Dickens, I don't know why I do,
Yes.
And I think he's because he was force-fed him by people he hated, so he thought he should hate him.
He also has referred to Dickens as being generously angry, which I think is a beautiful description of Dickens, and actually a beautiful description of Orwell.
But isn't it amazing that he picks up extraordinary passage from the beginning of Great Expectations, which is just so brilliant,
yes.
and then he says no. Why on earth do you say no after this? It's just he doesn't understand imaginative jumps, I think.
He doesn't like the moment when Uncle Pumblechook's robbed and they stuff the flowering annuals in his mouth. I mean, that makes me wonder about Orwell's intelligence, really.